In early 2005, Australia was transfixed with a case out of Bali. A young woman with a boogie board bag full of marijuana. But Schapelle Corby was about to become second-tier news. A reporter in Denpasar was interviewing Corby at the moment a vastly more consequential story erupted.
And I couldn't believe it. I was like, 9, are you sure? Yes. So I literally said to Schapelle Corby, Schapelle, I have to go. And I ran out the door to go down to the Denpasar police station, and that's where the 9 Australians were there in all of the police rooms, sitting there looking completely shell-shocked.
4 young Australians had been about to board a flight to Sydney with heroin strapped to their bodies. 5 others were quickly arrested nearby. The youngest, including Matthew Norman and Scott Rush, were untravelled, naive and still teenagers.
19.
The 2 young Brisbane men, it was their first time they'd ever gone overseas. In fact, one of them didn't even have a passport until literally before they embarked on this mission.
Scott Rush's father was so worried about the purpose of his son's trip to Bali, he had asked police to prevent him from leaving Australia.
I was informed at 1:30 in the morning that Scott would be spoken to and asked not to board the flight to Bali.
But Australian police had been investigating the heroin plot for months. Instead of intervening, they alerted Indonesia, a nation that executed drug traffickers.
The investigation began in Australia 10 weeks ago. Federal police are now under pressure to explain why they didn't wait to arrest the 9 accused once they'd reached Australia.
Why were the Indonesian police tipped off when the Australian Federal Police would have full well known that without any shadow of a doubt, having regard to the alleged quantity of heroin, the death penalty would follow?
The AFP's Mike Phelan made the call to tell Indonesian police about the heroin smugglers.
I can understand the emotion. I particularly understand it from the families. I understand it from certain portions of the legal fraternity. I fully understand their position. But narcotics trafficking is a dirty business.
Scott Rush, Matthew Norman and the others were jailed for life. Renee Lawrence pled guilty and gave evidence against her co-accused and still received a life term.
You told me my sentence would go down.
Indonesian judges showed no mercy to the men who organised the shipment and recruited the mules. Andrew Chan and an agitated Myron Sukumaran.
His blinking expression, the only indication of the way he felt inside. Told that he was a drug smuggling organiser with no remorse or cooperation to offer, Sukumaran could only wait for the word mati, Indonesian for death.
During a decade on death row, the characters of both men changed.
They decided to start telling the truth and admitting they were involved, which saw an enormous transformation in both of them.
The furious Sukumaran of 2005 eventually found peace in art. Chan was a pastor to other prisoners and was eventually ordained as a Christian minister. But they exhausted their legal efforts, and in early 2015 their families aimed desperate appeals for clemency at the Indonesian public, hoping to sway the nation's new president, Joko Widodo.
We as a family feel we know that it has caused a lot of shame for Indonesians, and we apologise.
He's a changed person, and I'm begging the president not to execute him, just to give him another chance.
Jokowi at the time was green and new, and he felt that he had to look very much at public sentiment. And the public sentiment in Indonesia is very pro-death penalty.
Some of Prime Minister Tony Abbott's lobbying sparked outrage in Indonesia.
Let's not forget that a few years ago, when Indonesia was struck by the Indian Ocean tsunami, Australia sent $1 billion worth of assistance.
And it became, unfortunately, somewhat of a test for the new president's leadership, that would he look strong? Would he stand up to pressure? from Australia and other international parts of the community.
The men were executed in April 2015, almost exactly 10 years after their arrests.
Each spent almost a third of their short lives on death row in Bali before meeting their violent deaths in a remote Indonesian jungle. They reportedly sang as they were shot.
Not only does there appear to have been a form of double punishment here, but these two individuals are as rehabilitated, they were as rehabilitated and reformed as two people can possibly be.
Australia recalled its ambassador in protest. In 2018, Tan Duc Tan Nguyen died of cancer. Mercy eventually came to just one of the Bali Nine. Renee Lawrence's life term was eventually cut to 20 years, and after 13 years in prison, she was free. The remaining Bali Nine, including Matthew Norman and Si Yi Chen, have continued to lodge annual appeals for clemency. Like Chan and Sukumaran, they have found some kind of purpose in prison, teaching trade skills to other inmates.
We feel very limited, well, I feel very limited in what I can do for myself, but I can set the boundaries for other people that might be going free pretty soon, to really just not look back, not get back into the old groove of things which led them to prison.
But there is, at last, hope. Indonesia says it has drafted a proposal to allow the imminent transfer of the Australians. It's unclear whether the prisoners will continue their jail terms once back home.
We hope that we can finalise these matters in this December. Yeah. So, but of course it is depend on the negotiations.